Tom Zenner scandal.
Did you have a relationship with them? Were you interested in looking into that, or did that just take off when John Ramsey, basically said CeCe Moore could solve this in an afternoon, essentially?
I didn't have a relationship with him. I'm so busy working hundreds of cases that I hadn't reached out to him. But when I was on the Today Show in 2018, when I was asked which case I would really like to work, I actually mentioned the JonBené case. So I'm not sure if that came to his attention or not. But, he's worked very hard to try to convince the agency to use investigative genetic genealogy. And I think at that time, 2 years ago, I had helped with over 200 cases with successful identifications. So he had obviously, seen the track record that we have. At Parabon, my very small team has now helped law enforcement resolve over 325 cases, which is one per week on average since we started working with law enforcement 6 years ago.
It's mind-boggling.
So with the JonBené, why would reading, the story about the JonBené case, why would the police not want to release the clothing with the DNA? Don't they want it solved? Am I correct? The police won't release the DNA on her clothing?
Now, I don't have any insider information since I have not been brought into the case, but that is also what I've heard. I think it's hard to know what's going on behind the scenes. And that's something I've really learned working with law enforcement. A person who previously had no law enforcement exposure or dealings, I've seen that oftentimes there's a lot of criticism that happens on these cases, but behind the scenes, the agency is working very hard and has very good reasons for what they do. So I'm not sure what they're really dealing with and what type of challenges they might be dealing with as far as that DNA. I mean, we know there's political challenges, of course, but if there's just a very tiny amount of DNA, if it's not enough to be able to perform investigative genetic genealogy, that could be the reason. We also know that they need to create a court admissible genetic profile, which takes a completely different processing lab. That would go to their crime lab. If they want to do investigative genetic genealogy, they have to send some of that DNA to a third party lab because none of the crime labs have that capability. And so if you have this tiny amount and you have to split it, that's very challenging. Yeah. And they need that traditional STR profile because that is what someone is arrested using. That is what is used in a court of law. Genetic genealogy is not used as evidence.
Right. Genetic, it's a little bit different. Kato, we had the episode maybe a year and a half ago with an author who wrote 2 books on the JonBené case. Now, she was very anti-police force. And you know what? So am I. Now, you're a pop culture fan. You follow these cases. I'm sure you follow that one very closely. Kato, I have my theories on this too. I think there were so many mistakes at the get-go. So many people could be exposed for some bad police work, bad detective work. And it makes no sense. How is this thing not solved?
This is Tom and I thinking alike. I was just going to say the exact same thing because we like playing detective. And I was going to say, after you go on about your theory or whatever, with CeCe, it's hard not to play detective if you have a theory. But Tom, that episode, I was thinking the exact same thought, like, how is it not solved?
They pinned it on the parents so early, or there was so much attention thinking maybe John did it. And then you had that weird ransom note. This story is one of the biggest mysteries that, if you're alive right now, that we've had in our life, just because of the media attention and how heinous it was. A 6-year-old girl, just disgusting. Everything about it just sickens me. But any red flags, anything stand out with you as far as like who made the biggest mistakes, where the blunders were, why this wasn't solved? Are we making this more complicated than it should be? I know DNA was way different back then, but if there's some left, if there's some traces, what could you do with that DNA if you got your hands on it?
Well, if there is enough viable DNA to perform investigative genetic genealogy, then we would absolutely be able to identify the contributor of that DNA. Now, they would have to determine whether that meant it was the killer or not, right? Because we all leave DNA behind everywhere we go. There may be DNA on her clothes that are not from the perpetrator. Maybe there are the people in the factory's DNA that created those clothes, that handled those clothes and packaged them. There could be people's DNA from, say, if the killer bought something at Lowe's or Home Depot, right? And so we don't know if that DNA necessarily would tie back to the suspect, but we would certainly want to try. It also would be dependent on the population group. So if it is DNA from, say, a factory in China, we wouldn't be able to identify the owner of that DNA, but we could definitely say that this isn't an individual from that part of the world. If it's a white guy, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, we'd be able to identify him probably in a matter of hours, because the genetic genealogy databases that we have and the records that we have are heavily weighted toward being able to identify people with deep roots in the United States and primarily Northwest European ancestry. And so it really just depends what they have and if it is absolutely tied to that crime or if it could be DNA that was just left behind by somebody else incidentally.
Hey there, I'm Tom Zenner, and if you're a fan of true crime and pop culture scandal, I think you are, well, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Give us a like, because trust me, the drama is just starting to heat up. Follow me on social media at Tom Zenner, and keep coming back to the channel, and we're going to keep bringing you the scandal every single day. New content. Thanks for watching.